as people are still gathering, I just wanted to say a few things just to get us prepared for the flow of the event. This is part of a larger enterprise that's really global, many different streams coming together. So I just want to give you a sense of that. Some of you may have heard of Birth 2012 celebration. Barbara Marx and a range of evolutionary leaders, well-known people, are part of that. And but there's so many different groups around the planet who have been seeing and sensing and knowing that the people are stirring and ready for some kind of awakened, mindful way of being a human, that we need to face the problems on the planet and shift our consciousness to get to the heart of the matter. And so on December 22nd of this month, there's going to be an attempt to call people together around the planet, potentially 100 million, just to choose a number. And there'll be live streaming for 30 hours from the Shift Network out of California, in a network around the planet, starting out of Australia, and then going through Asia, and through Europe, and up into UK and Dublin, then down to Philadelphia. So that's a stop here. And we originally planned this event for the 22nd to be live streaming, but since the college was closed, we moved it to the 1st, which is good because students are with us. By then, all the students are gone. So I just want to give you a sense of the background and the context. So that's one of the streams. It's been participating in the Birth 2012 global enterprise involving many, many people and leaders around the planet. This is going to keep going, the streaming all around. This event here on the 1st is our Philadelphia celebration of the birthing of our democracy, in the birthplace of our democracy. As part of the Birth 2012, one of the greatest things is the deepening of our democracy in fidelity to the founding and the energy here. So that's really one of the things we're doing. And a follow-up to this, you may see cameras around because it's going to try and capture the dialogue. This is for us to have a conversation about what do you feel, where are we now in the state of our democracy, to hear your voices, a wide range, whatever you feel, we want to hear your voice. So that's really the first part of this gathering today, and then celebration with music, dance, and art after the break, around 2:30. I've drafted a draft of a possible declaration of interdependence, and I'll be presenting that later. Many of you have seen copies of it as a kind of focal point for our conversation. What does interdependence mean? And we'll have a possibility, if you wish to join in signing. And this is being filmed to create about a 45-minute video from this that will be presented to the people in California, the Shift Network, that will be streaming. So what we're doing is going to be included. So when you hit Philadelphia, going around the world on the 22nd, right, birthing of democracy, what's up here? So that's the larger context. On the 21st of this month, those of you who wish to join us in holding a space in People's Plaza at Constitution Hall in Philadelphia, in the night, in the cold. Bring your candles, if you wish, to really hold and continue the signing for those who wish to symbolically sign the declaration. We'll talk about what that means. And the next day I'm going up to Rye, New York, to Wainwright House, which is another place that the intention was to take these signatures in the document to the UN, because it's a global event too. It's not only for us here in America, but it's a global, we the people, and the UN just as well needs to understand and appreciate and join us in the Declaration of Interdependence. So it's going to go to the Wainwright House and symbolically to present it to the global we the people. And so that's really the larger context of it. So it looks as if since I began speaking, we may be ready to begin. So that was just to give you a sense of it. So the first part, we're going to have a global conversation, a global dialogue town meeting to hear your voices. And I'll introduce Dr. Kurt Johnson. You may have gotten a flyer for his book. And he's a dear friend and colleague who just in the last moment, a few days ago, said he'll come down to join me. just to say a little bit about Kurt Johnson. Amazing journey. He was in a monastic life as a contemplative, but he was also deeply involved in certain Eastern forms of religious thought, and it was pressing the edge at the time in terms of monastic life, and he got in trouble with his elders for being open to other spiritual traditions as deeply as he was. A deep associate of Brother Wayne Teasdale, who was one of our eminent members who's passed away now, but one of our eminent members of the World Commission on Global Consciousness, which I helped to co-found with some other leaders. And he wrote the Heart, the Mystic Heart, which is a very powerful book. So Brother Wayne Teasdale was one of the pioneers of seeing spirituality in a global light, of the diverse, unique forms of this awakening he sees as connected in the mystic heart. And Dr. Kurt Johnson was a dear friend and close associate. And so the book that is now coming out and arriving, the Coming Interspiritual Age, is really a frontier work that's getting wide recognition. And so we're delighted that Kurt Johnson is going to be with us. Kurt, would you like to say a few words to Jess?
I'm good on sound? All right. Well, it's wonderful to be here. And, Ashok and I go back a long time in these discussions, which have been brewing for decades, very interestingly, on the cusp of the millennium. It's funny when you look at the timelines here. To give you just a little quick background about what's backgrounding why you're here and why we're here and why, as Ashok said, so many people in the world are doing this. The brain-mind studies currently show that, and of course that they trace this for many centuries, but that the current trend is for the human brain-mind to go to seeing profound interconnectedness, oneness, and a falling away of all the boundaries of the traditional boxes of race, creed, religion, sexual preference, whatever it would be, especially in younger people, but even in people of older age who are also awakening to that gestalt. The sense of profound interconnectedness seems to be the direction that brain-mind development is going for the whole world. From that comes the Arab Spring, from that comes the Catholic Spring, from that comes Occupy. Everything that's demanding the vision of we, all right? Another part of that, and Ashok's been a big part of this with the World Commission and his work with the Parliament of World Religions, is that a reflection of that reality is that the contemplatives across all the world's traditions, doesn't matter which, even secular contemplatives, the deeper you go in consciousness and heart, they're almost synonymous at a certain point. The realization you come to is not a religious narrative. It's an experience of this profound connectedness, this profound sense of separation dropping away, of not feeling separate anymore, and understanding profoundly the implications of what that feeling about reality brings to you. Obviously, then, all of you are here to some degree because of that experience of knowing that lens. And then, as Ashok said, and this kind of wrap it for me, but springing off of that are major, multifaceted movements with hundreds of authors and hundreds of leaders and hundreds of books that are talking about one or another aspect of this new lens that's so interestingly timed with the millennium, whether that affects governance, social justice, economics, religion, spirituality, science. When you study this, and this is what we've really done in the Coming Interspiritual Age, you see that there's an arising of this unity understanding and a discussion of this unity understanding in every one of these fields. And they're arising spontaneously because of really what's downloading in the consciousness of human beings as we move toward this gestalt of profound interconnectedness. And so, for instance, he mentions Barbara Marx Hubbard, Evolutionary Consciousness Movement, the group that he's a part of, Evolutionary Leaders, which is one of the vanguards of that group. Then there's the Interspiritual Movement, of which I'm a part, which is how this is playing among the religions and deconstructing the old religious boxes. Then you've got the Sacred Activism Movement, You've got all of the discussions about ecology and climate change. So there's a cutting edge across the entire world. And we're lucky that we get around enough. For instance, I serve on a committee at the UN that monitors this. It's called the Committee on Spirituality, Values, and Global Concerns. And when you see what's going on at a worldwide level, like Ashok said, it's astounding. Not only astounding, but it makes you feel good about where things, it can make an optimist out of you, and all of us could use a little optimism these days. So that's why I'm happy to be here, and was happy to just be able to come down and say hello in that sense from that wider part of the discussion globally. This is alive and well. It's more than alive and well. So, and the other part of it is whatever you can do in your circle of constituencies to leaven this message, that's what you should do, because this is where things are going. So that's.
Thank you, Kurt. So I think we should just begin. I think we seem to be settled. So again, I'm Ashok. I've been a professor of philosophy here for 45 years and getting warmed up. And I'm delighted to be with you and to help facilitate this conversation on the state of where we are in our democracy. How do you feel about the civic space where we meet ostensibly? What are the forces of unity? How well are we handling diversity? Are we in gridlock? Do we need to really improve and build upon the great founding of this nation and the ethos, that means the ethics, the worldview that was emerging and birthing here in Philadelphia for freedom and life, liberty, pursuit, all of these wonderful ideals. Where are we in the state of our union or disunion? And you may have seen the cover letter, but I'd like us to begin this dialogue with a moment of silence. So to build on the notes that Kurt opened up about the many different movements around the planet, right here at Haverford in this room, over the last decade, we've been having gatherings that are prior to and setting the stage for this particular moment. For example, in the year 2000, there was a global streaming event and moving into the new millennium, and here at Haverford, we held the space for that global moment, and we're part of that. Soon after that, we had several great town meetings here with eminent leaders, Global Responsibility, Our Reason for Hope, where Jane Goodall was here with us. Wangari Maathai, the holder of the Nobel Peace Prize, was here with us in that conversation. And what people began to feel in the audience is like, oh, something is happening. This is not something for the future. It's happening now. And they felt that this is a beginning of a movement that's stirring. This is way back then. And you may have seen, I shared with some of you the Tokyo Declaration as part of the World Wisdom Council that was presented in Tokyo in front of 5,000 people, which was a part of the same spirit, this building of this sense that we need to get together and see if our human family across the planet, across our borders, are ready to come together, in our diversity, not to compromise that, but to appreciate and deepen that, but to find the ways to creatively recognize our interconnectivity. So it's been continuing, and in Barcelona, where we launched another declaration for the birth of global spirituality, which led to all kinds of implications, including our friends here, Richard Siebel of the Haverford Friends. We felt that it was important to hold a global Quaker meeting to see the global power of silence of the Quaker technology that was part of the founding of the nation. So I'm just trying to give a sense of the many streams and tributaries leading to this moment where we feel, let's give a call to the people that the founding is not over. It's as sacred and important as it is. It was an opening and a beginning, and to realize that the awakening of democracy, we the people, in terms of our maturing as global citizens for our global times, that this is part of the continuing evolutionary moment. So that's the spirit of this gathering, that we're here as primary holders and co-founders of our nation. So we're going to open up dialogue in a moment, and I want to go and give some summary at this chart of some things to think about in terms of two ways to think about democracy. When I say global, some people get spooked, and it's understandable, because global democracy doesn't mean around the world, one global democracy. That's not what I mean. The word global in philosophy, in culture, in wisdom, means right where we are right now in our local mental space. Since we're facing different worldviews, different ideologies, different orientations across borders, different religions in our culture around us, the word global means the capacity to negotiate and deal with that diversity creatively and non-violently. So global doesn't mean literally like a global corporation around the world or some one world government. Please put those ideas aside. That's not what we're talking about. To be a human being, to have literacy as a human, as a rational being, awakening our reason, we dilate our lens of the mind so we can deal creatively and non-violently in the interface with other perspectives, other worldviews, other religions. That's what global means in philosophy. So it means a capacity to deal with the other. And that, I'm suggesting, is already implanted in the heart of the birth of our democracy, insofar as it has to do with we the people, coming together and holding the power. Because if we're living a mental space in which we're divided and fragmented across our different perspectives, if whatever lens of the mind I have, or world or perspective I have, and I think that that's the only way to understand reality, the primary way, and the other is secondary, right? That is monocentric. Mono meaning my worldview is primary, and the other is derivative. It's not dialogic. A dialogical mind has her position, of course. And I may be a Christian, I may be a Jew, I may be a Muslim, I may be an atheist, I may be secular, whatever you'd like to call it. But in the midst of that, I don't say that's the only way, and I lay my lens on the other. But to open space so that I can listen and respectfully hear the voice of the other. That's what global means. That's the global shift. And so I'm going to go up and just put a little visualization. And some of you have heard me speak before, seen me in my journey as a philosopher over the past 45 years, because I'm a logician, trained in the laws of logic and the laws of consciousness. That's what logic is. Logic studies the science of how we think and the legitimate thinking, well-formed thoughts. And ontology is a branch of philosophy. That's ontos means being, the grammar of reality. So the science of reality and the science of thought is my journey. But as I went across different traditions across the planet, raised in the European tradition, trained in logic, but then going into Indian philosophy, studying Chinese philosophy, looking at African thought, beginning to listen to feminist philosophy, indigenous thinking. How do we get our worlds together? How do we find our worlds? How do we move across our different worldviews? And what I began to see, and which is well known, that it's very challenging to cross different worldviews. A worldview is a profound space where the lens of your mind, which is shaped from day one of birth in your culture, your lens of your mind, your culture is shaping a grammar, a structure that you use to make sense of the world, and that's your language, or the level of literacy. And when you realize that wherever you are in your worldview, it's very challenging to cross into the world of the other. It has a different grammar. And to translate it, you can mistranslate it if you don't know the code for the other culture. If I'm in the Christian world, let's say, which is highly complex and diverse already, can I understand the Hindu mind? Can I go into the Chinese world? Can I understand certain African visions of reality? Can I understand the indigenous Lakota, indigenous Indian worldview, which sees the world very differently? That's a great challenge. And so what I began to see over the decades as a teacher is that, how do we bring our worlds together? And is there a common story emerging from our greatest visionary leaders across, and scriptures and wisdom teachers across the planet? And that's really what I just briefly want to give a sense of, to give us a thought for our dialogue, which we'll open in a moment. What we find when we step back from any one when we step back from whatever worldview we're in and begin to dilate our hearts and minds. And by the way, the words heart and mind is very important, because you notice that one heart, one mind is also collaborating with us in this event with art and music after the dialogue. And we'll talk about what does it mean to have one heart and one mind without diversity. It doesn't mean one. It means a deep sense of coming together. So that's one of the themes we'll deal with. But basically it's this, that wherever we are in our cultural journey and our language, I'll gesture here, what we see when we listen to the geniuses, the innovators, the pioneers, all through, who brought wisdom and enlightenment to the people across the planet, they noticed that our language was not rich enough and powerful enough to understand the primary reality. There's a fundamental force out of which this universe is emerging. That's a consensus across the planet. And whatever name or language you're in or culture, how do you name that fundamental force? So in the Chinese classical wisdom, Lao Tzu calls it Tao. The Tao that is named in the ordinary language is not the Tao. You may have heard that. That's the opening lines of his classic teaching, deep in the Chinese classical mind. If you go into the Hindu Vedic tradition, where you meditate on this fundamental reality, you can't think about it in the ordinary way. That's the main point I'm making. Our habits of thought and language, of talking about the world and ourselves and information and processing each other, right? That level of language is a stage, but it's not deep and rich enough to adequately enter into the fundamental field and force. So the Hindu yoga philosophy of wisdom there is meditate on Om. Om is the name, the infinite force, the infinite script. It's very curious that when you begin to get into all these traditions, they seem that the fundamental reality is infinite script, infinite word, infinite symbol, infinite sign. Very important. It's weird to think of that. Infinite language. But if you try to put it in the box where we usually live, we can't get it. So there's been a very serious disconnect between where we are in our everyday culture and the call of the deep wisdom to enter into the field in a more profound and direct way. And so the Buddha's breakthrough, when he had his great awakening from this, seeing that this is where we suffer and this is where we leave that space into the deeper field, the Buddha field. And what does the Buddha find? That reality is an infinite flow of connection. Everything is interconnected. Not just people with people, but people with all creatures, with ecology, with the stars, with the universe. It's all interconnected. If you get into the origins of the Judaic tradition, Yahweh, infinite spirit, and out of Yahweh, let there be light, and the universe emanates out of that. That's another great insight. The fundamental force is the source of everything that happens in all the worlds, all the perspectives, all the scripts must come out of that. So if you're using Yahweh as the infinite force, that's a whole other tradition. Or you may call it Allah, another name for the force, the infinite. Or whatever name, Buddha called it emptiness, shunyata, because he didn't want to dare to bring any of these names in the box into the place of the Buddha space. And so on and on. You find Socrates, and one of the founders and heroes of the European tradition, seeing that everyday humans are living in the cave, and our everyday beliefs and perceptions where we are at a level is not the full maturation of human reason. What is reason? Which is a fundamental gift. What is that in the Greek? The logos. And what is a philosopher? A philosophia. Sophia, lover of Sophia, phile Sophia. So my profession is, allegedly, if I'm seeking wisdom, lover of wisdom, wisdom is Sophia. So philosophia is love of, what does that mean? Leaving where you are with looking at the objects and believing their senses at a superficial level, and moving into the rational light. And that is the journey of philosophy. They're all claiming that. They're all saying what's on the ground floor is not where we are in our everyday level of development in language and script. And we need to somehow upscript into the deeper literacy, the deeper language. It's a different level of thinking, of reason, of language. And if we humans are rational beings, what we're most called for is to awaken our rationality. East and west, north and south. And that's really what this is about. So that if you could visualize it, if there's a space in which we are, where we tend to be, and here the thinker and the screen of awareness, and we have the objects of our thought, including ourselves, because we process ourselves there, and we bring information together to create our mental structures and beliefs. All of our mental life is being processed in this space. But the main point is this line means it's cut off from the place where everything is in flow. Whether you call this Tao, Om, Yahweh, Christ, Allah, energy, Nomo, nature, whatever name you use for the infinite, there is a deep script, a grammar, that to cross into this space is the journey of our maturation as humans. And it's not an inconsequential thing. This is the place where reason lights up. We could choose one name, Logos, Sophia. Just to, usually Logos is taken to be more male-oriented. Sophia is the feminine. So let's have one primal name, Logos Sophia. What is that? The name for the fundamental field. We could use Tao, we could use Chi, we could use many different names because it has infinite name power. That's very important. The infinite force has infinite capacities, infinite names, all scripts. So it's not that Christ is the same as Buddha. They're different. They're different. They're holonyms, not synonyms, but holonyms. They're alternative names to get to the infinite in their diversity. And the consensus is coming out of the wisdom of the planet, that the logosphere is that everything is interconnected, woven together. Whereas in this level of our development, we put things in separate boxes. Everything is put into a separate piece because that's how we're living. One name, A is A. Everything has its name tag, including me. And that's a naive practice of identity. And all of our language and experience and dealing with each other, this is a place of it. I, it. And if you can cross into this place, and so all of yoga philosophy, all of Buddha's awakening, all of the Christ journey, the Quaker journey, all of these traditions will say, come into the I, thou, where the other is sacred other, that you don't put your lens on her as an object, but you stand open before the other, whomever the other is, another culture, another religion, your lover, a work of art, nature. Open up. That's the space of dialogue. This is monologue, I, it. This is dialogue, I, thou. And the point is that if this is where our democracy and our culture and our politics is being played out in terms of this level of literacy, question I'm asking, if we are truly, according to the wisdom teachers, I, thou beings, not I, it beings, and that's a consensus of all our moral awakening teachers, never treat a person as an object, but as a presence. Don't objectify yourself or the other. So ethics is a space in which you discover you're connected with the other, and you honor the other as yourself. Jesus was teaching that, Buddha is seeing that, Krishna is seeing that. That's all across the board. Kant was seeing that. Don't objectify each other. So I just want to open this theme up, and just for our dialogue, what I'm suggesting is that we can have American democracy here. We're broken into our many different perspectives, and we don't talk to one another. We don't know how to communicate across our different ideologies which are here, our different stories. We could have many different stories in the marketplace. Different religions, different cultures, different ideologies, different disciplines, all with their different IDs. But can they dialogue is a question. And we need dialogue for democracy. Because if democracy is we, the people hold the power. The point is, can we be we here? Or must we, as Martin Luther King said in his dream, I have a dream, one day we're going to get there. He's dreaming about the place of dialogue, where a diversity will stand, but we can connect with one another across and in respect of our diversity. So diversity is fundamental here. And diversity here can fragment and break away from the unity. So if we're one nation, indivisible, under logos, right, the question I'm posing for our conversation is, where do we need to be in our democracy? And could it be that we have not completed our Declaration of Independence? Because to remove the British, the monarch, from our land is stage one. But if we keep this way of thinking and we objectify each other, I mean, women can't vote and we have slaves. And we may end that, but if we keep that mental process going, and our great geniuses are saying, that is a form of slavery. It's a form of being in the cave. It's a form of bondage. Liberate the mind, liberate the human, enter the light, go into reason. That's the call across the planet. So it's a huge issue. Where is our democracy going to thrive? And so if e pluribus unum means out of the many one, not one here, not unity here, but unity here, where it's boundlessly diverse. Could this be the place of e pluribus unum? So I wanted to really get these questions out and now hear from you about your sense of where we are. So please join me in a conversation, and now you're on. There's a microphone here, so we'd love to hear your thoughts. And it's not limited, in any one topic. We could talk about the state of unity or disunity in our culture. We could talk about, what do you feel about the state of a democracy? Do you feel it's in a good place? Do you feel are we in gridlock? Are we fragmented? Is the civic space broken? Are we the people? Could we improve the state of our democracy? These are questions I hope we'll address. So the floor is open for you, and we'd love to have a conversation. And what we'll do is, by the way, you may have seen a declaration, my draft of a Declaration of Interdependence, based upon the suggestion that we can have interdependence in the lower space, which is codependence, which is not very healthy. But interdependence is very profound. It means we're woven together. We humans in the polis, the community, are woven together profoundly. And we need to discover that, and that's the we the people. So the floor is open, so let's hear from you. Please, there's a microphone. Please come up to the microphone. This way we'll have your... And at this point, really talk to each other, please. It's... Maybe I can even share my microphone with you. It might be faster. You okay?
My biggest frustration is I feel like the corporations have bought America and they're on their way to buying the world. And I feel like it's bigger than I am and helpless in all of this.
Thank you for sharing that. And, at this point, I don't want it to be one-on-one in terms of us. Kurt, you jump in at any point if you wish. But, thank you for sharing that comment. Would someone like to respond to that? How do you feel about that? Because that's a theme that comes up, that the corporations, are dominating our culture. How do you feel? Please speak up. Come to the microphone. We'd love to hear from you. We're speaking to each other in this conversation.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I absolutely agree with that. The last election, actually, let me back up a little bit. If anybody has seen the series on the History Channel of the men who built America, in the last episode of that, they showed how Carnegie, Rockefeller, Morgan, others literally purchased the election when McKinley was voted in place. They literally bought the election thinking they had secured their position in controlling America's economy, which fundamentally controls much of what we do, much of our history. Marx was sort of correct there. I think Marx was off base on a few things, but who's fundamentally correct in saying that all history is economic. We are in a position now, in that episode, they purchased this thinking they were going to be victorious. They even handpicked the vice presidential candidate by putting Theodore Roosevelt in place, thinking that way they could marginalize Roosevelt's attempt to break up the trusts. What they didn't count on was an assassination. And McKinley gets assassinated, and suddenly they're in a position where the guy that they didn't want to be president was there. It altered fundamentally what we had in terms of our economic system at that point, which still went a little haywire over the Great Depression. And the recovery from that Great Depression then produces legislation that regulates that industry, or the corporations, which, by the way, are not people too. And as a result of the legislation that was there, we went an extended period of time with very minor economic turmoil. We had some, but they were fairly minor. As you started to see the regulation break down, you started to see the economic crises increase until we get to the 1980s, where the Reagan administration brings in deregulation, and who cares about deficits? Deficits don't matter. And we end up building what we have now, which is a huge deficit, which is actually putting the rest of us in bondage. If we go back to the Middle Ages, we see serfdom and a manner economy where you have this huge disparity between those that have and those that do not. Those that have control those that do not. We're now seeing that from a corporate level, and our governments are meaningless. It doesn't matter who we elected to go into the White House. Both sides were purchased by the corporations. So I totally agree with what she's saying. And the struggle for myself, and I would guess for others who are taking their Saturday to come here, the struggle is, how do we counter that and make the shift have meaning? Because there is just so much power behind all that money, and they can control so many aspects of our lives. And I didn't mean to get on a downer, because that's kind of a depressing way to look at it.
This is time to share our hearts. I want to hear.
Yeah, and that's the fact of the matter. And what and this thread's going to continue. So what I want to do is just give a little insight on where that pathology comes from. Where the pathology comes from is that the human mind has not been the same over history. It's continued to cognitively develop. And we had 70 centuries of monarchy and totalitarianism before the analytical brain started to arise in the Renaissance, in which the internal conversation within human beings started to make them more apt to listen to the voices in their own conversation than the voice of the Pope, the voice of the king, the voice of the monarch. So as the Renaissance brought that analytical mind to the fore, new self-evident truths arose about the value of the individual, the value of the I. Now what's interesting is that if you mark that around, 1500 to 1400s, the Renaissance, it wasn't until 200, 300 years later that that gestalt of the inherent self-evident rights of the individual changed the structures on the planet and erupted in Europe and in the United States to become exactly this, the Declaration of Independence. Huge that we make the statement that we take these truths to be self-evident. Now, one of the pathologies that came along with that is the greed that can be narcissistically associated with the selfishness of that I space, be it the individual, be it the corporation, or be it the individual leading the corporation and using the law as his excuse that greed is good. The ethos of Wall Street, greed is good, right? And short-term thinking, profit only, next election only, not planning for the future. What's happening now and what frames this conversation and why you're here, and I think this is where we can really be optimistic, but the question is how to be skillful. As the brain has continued to evolve, the new gestalt that is arising is the one that everybody gets here, that everything is profoundly interconnected. This selfishness is not going to work. At a global level and a multicultural level, it cannot work. It is not sustainable. And so up arises a new self-evident truth. This is what we make really clear in what we've written, The new self-evident truth is about we. It's about what is a responsible collective. So the questions that you're framing about corporations and about access to resources, fair play and this other stuff, is the question of this emergent we. What are the responsibilities self-evidently in a collective? So where that's at now in the species that's arising, we all start to get that. Ashok just did this great job of showing how that's embedded in our sense of everything. But the race against time comes in how we build new structures and new skill sets that have a different way of doing this than the old structures which are holding this message that will not work. And of course, this is the end of it, but what it brings up is the question, hard landing or soft landing? Are we going to have a cataclysm before people really get that the way they're doing things now is not sustainable? Or will we be able to spread this message and have the natural evolution that's going on in our cognitive apparatus take us to a softer landing? This is the big anthropological tug of war on the planet right now. And so it really frames the conversation, here.
Thanks for those comments. Next, please, come on.
Thank you. Your question brought up a question for me, your answer just now. You seem to be saying that the shadow side of the Declaration of Independence might be narcissism and greed. And I'm wondering what the shadow side for the current, hopeful, promising gestalt might be.
Thank you.
I'll pass that back to Ashok, because he actually was addressing this. In other words, it's one thing to have an awareness. It's another thing to be skilled about that awareness. And this is true in relationships. It's true at every level that we're interconnected with other things. So we really have to do what Ashok was just doing. We have to go through these basic fundamental underpinnings of what moves us in the heart in relationships, and then ask ourselves, what does that imply for how we're actually doing things? Now, that sounds abstract right now, but in living life, to make this jump you're talking about, for instance, in Bhutan right now, this is the way they organize their government. They have a set of cultural goals that are about the well-being of everyone. And that's across education, across economics, across how to treat the environment. Every decision that country makes is reverse engineered from addressing that fundamental need that the collective has said they all agree on. Now, everyone probably in the room is saying, oh, that's great, but what a huge step. Oh my God, how could we ever get to that, right? But the same was true when the Renaissance was trying to up-tip monarchy, and yet it managed to happen. So this whole thing of how we define what new structures will look like and also what will drive them, what we can say yes to. You go back to why Obama got elected, let's say the first time, people said yes to a sense of vision, right? And then where they got disillusioned was when that vision wasn't articulated skillfully. And that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I'd like to just go back to the flip chart and try to articulate that further. The shadow side that you point out, could there be a shadow side for the we? And I was trying to bring that out because, and this may be one way to do it. There's a we here, and there's a we here. The we here does not compromise diversity. It's not like a we that waters down, because the infinite field is infinitely open and diverse. So if you're a Christian here and a Buddhist here and Muslim here, whatever you are, you don't give that up to be in the we. You're deepening it because it's even deeper than any label that could be. Every point, every grain of sand here, because of this field of interconnectivity, as the poet Blake said, there's infinity in a grain of sand, an eternity in an hour. That is huge. That's the source of the sacredness of every individual. An individual in the logos space is encoding the logos within. The Quakers got that. There's that of God in every person. That's a namaste principle, that the infinite is present in you. The science of that is that if the genius of the planet is correct, and there is an infinite fundamental force, then the ABC understanding, it's infinitely here in every morsel. It's presiding in every breath, in every word we say, the capacity to even think, it's already presiding. And if we dare to have an upscript and more powerful voltage of script and literacy to handle and surf in the zone, that field, that's where we blossom as a full self, as a full person, as a mensch. That's what the teachers are saying. If we download that here, the shadow comes out in the following way. Because if the language we're using of identity and we download the we here, or unity, for example, this unity squelches in this space. Unity, monocentric ego-mental unity, can't handle diversity. Unity here is boundlessly open. That's the point I was making about e pluribus unum. E pluribus unum, if we want unity, we will say we've got to squelch difference. We've got to melt it to create that unity. And that can be a shadow. So if we say we, and we the people, I to we, if the we is here and we're downloading our scriptures here, this becomes a shadow. That's the point. So when we have a fear of one world government, let's not talk about global democracy. It's spooky, scary. It sounds like one world government and we've lost our unique, sacred personal space, which we don't want to ever compromise. And that's at the heart of the birth of our democracy. But in this place, the great teachers are saying, this is where the shadow is. This is the cave. And so the question before us is to follow the prescription of our great wisdom teachers and to move into the place. Not to download that here, but to move into the awakened rational space, leaving the box of identity where things are broken and compromised. So the question before us is this script dominating in our culture? So if we use something like we, see, so that's a shadow effect. So in Socrates' version, humans are living in the cave. And to realize yourself and mature, you've got to go into the light. You've got to come out of the cave. Right? That's Buddha, and that's Krishna, that's Jesus. They're all saying that. So that's how you have to bring out the shadow issue.
And then at the practical level, and again, you go back to the analog of the Renaissance, these shifts didn't happen overnight. They happened by periods of experimentation by groups and peoples with new structures to see what actually would work to reflect that deeper essence they were looking for. And so what we're basically saying is that we're in a glimpsing period now. And we don't need to beat ourselves that we may not see the structures right away. But what we have to do is we have to invite a period of experimentation. Hopefully we've got more than decades. I'd like to think we do. We may not. But whatever amount of time we've got to experiment with what does it look like when we live and build structures around these deeper ways of being. Those will happen locally. They'll happen in community. They'll happen in places like this. And there'll be things that bring a yes from the heart, which then travels by word of mouth, which is exactly how the early democracies evolved. If you see, there were all kinds of experiments. Some worked better than others. Some had some collateral damage. Some had a lot of collateral damage. But you eventually got to the change of the paradigm. So that's, I think, also important for us to understand. We're going to have a period of experimentation. It can be local. It can be in, like Ashok was saying, in how you live your own life. For instance, I just endorsed a book about the spirit in trees. And people could think, well, you're a tree hugger. But the point of the book was that little moments of connection are huge for the soul. And they become huge for what that soul becomes like in its relationships with people. So these things are intricately interconnected. So that's another part of it. Experiment.
Hello, thank you for the conversation. I wanted to respond to a couple things. I heard one of this gentleman here and someone else made a comment about the corporations and sort of the greed and that whole paradigm of narcissism. And from all the my own personal journey and all the readings that I have been doing in terms of this whole process of moving towards an evolutionary shift, as Barbara Marx Hubbard talks about moving into an evolutionary shift, one piece of this process is doing our own inner reflection of our own work. And when you talk about shadow, for me, it's about looking at our own shadows we carry within ourselves, because I believe that we are all one, we are all interconnected, and we are a global world. For these people to operate, to the people that are operating from places of greed, narcissism, I believe we need to look at that within ourselves, because if we are all co-creators, we are in some way either complicit or we are co-creating what is happening in this so-called morphogenic field, which is all around us, which we are part of. So for these people to have power, we have to be giving up our power, or we have to be perhaps denying our own shadow part of ourselves that says, where is my greed? And if we don't look at that part of ourselves, then these people will show up, in the world around us, until we say, this is a part of me, until we can recognize that we carry these aspects of ourselves. And when part of the process that I see as an evolutionary process is that we have to go into our own shadow and see that within ourselves before we can see it out there. And until we go deeper within ourselves and see it within our own psyches, these are going to continue happening and showing up as we deny those pieces. So one of the things that Marianne Williamson talks about, Global Renaissance Alliance, which she created these citizen salons, which I was a part of many years ago, and she talks about how do we take spiritual action, how do we take all the spirituality, all these wonderful spiritual ideas of tolerance and compassion and finding inner peace, going within, and meditation. How do we use these tools so that we can put them into spiritual action, so that we hold these visions within ourselves in a state of prayer, inner reflection, and then we focus on a corporation or an organization or some corruption that's out there that we want to take on, such as an Occupy movement of some sort, so that we really occupy first within our own hearts, and then we occupy it out there. So it's a dual process, and if we forget that process, then we feel a sense of disempowerment and disconnection. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's hear other voices. Keep going, please.
I just want to say that I apologize, I came late, so if I say something that seems not to take into account everything that's been said to this point, please excuse that. So I didn't hear everything you spoke about a collectivity, but that word in my mind, as someone who has studied history, is very much associated with attempts at imposing utopian collectives in societies, and I don't think you can point to anyone in history where that has ever worked out. In fact, it's always worked out to be, in my opinion, much worse than the kind of greed that we see around us, much worse. It usually, the first thing that comes after arriving in power is the Cultural Revolution, which means children killing parents, neighbors, etc. Complete destruction of millions upon millions of people. So we hear a lot of talk about the collective today, and I wish that when you think of it in the higher space, it's something that I can assent to, but I also look around at humanity and say, there's very few people who inhabit that space permanently. We all, maybe a small percentage touches into it, some of the saints, etc., live in it, but mostly we're striving to be in it. And therefore, I feel there's a danger when you go towards a collective. I believe actually that it is through personal and inner enlightenment, like what you were saying, when each individual attends and changes, that will automatically shift everything. But talk about collectives, especially by our government, et cetera, or any government, or anyone who has power over us, to me is a very threatening thing and a very frightening thing, and it does lead towards, in the lower brackets, towards totalitarianism and the shadow side of globalism. So how can we how do we get there from here if it's about the very, very difficult task of achieving personal enlightenment that usually only a few people, a handful of humans in any given generation ever attain to? How can we do it?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right in what you've characterized, that without the bringing to the we this maturity of the I, what happens at we will be pathological. Now, luckily, we're in an evolving system, so we're at a new plateau now of experimentation where hopefully the sets of tools that we have, even what you just expressed, that you see this, how this doesn't work if it's not done skillfully. You identify that clearly. What that does at a global level is it tells the world, come on, let's not make the mistakes we did in the past. The heart's urging us to go this direction, but we can't do what we did in the past. And of course, we don't know what the result will be, but we do know that we're wanting to follow the prescription that you're laying out. And it's huge. But what other alternative do we have except to try to get good at it, right?
Yes, but you know, one of the serious dangers is, especially with young people, where it's so easy for sort of malevolent forces, if you will, to alter language to make it resonate with something that they may have heard of that belongs to the higher brackets, but in fact is the shadow and is consciously shadow. And then the young people like useful idiots or lemmings or darling, whatever you want, I adore them. We were all there once. I'm an oldie now. But you know, there's no discernment, and especially when the education that is gotten is somewhat colored towards what I think is the wrong kind of collectivity, if you will, the collectivity that frightens me.
Thank you so much. These are great questions that are opening up, so I'd like to keep encouraging that. I just want a couple of quick comments, because the heart of what I was suggesting is that the kind of deep involvement in the ego-mental mind, but I use the lower space, I use single strokes to mark it. There has been a profound conflation of the higher script and the lower script in the same space. They have not been disentangled. And all geniuses is calling us to try and find that way into the higher script. My own work in this area has been to put a font, a quote, to show, that's what the double parentheses is meant to do, that check it out, folks. When Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, Moses bringing the law, Abraham's struggle, they were tapping that deeper script, but they were in the same space. It's vital in our evolution and clarity now as humans to see the difference. Because if we don't, then we will then inevitably fall into the shadow mind, the shadow script, where ideologies and then tyranny can come in the collective, as you're pointing out. The question and challenge is enlightenment meant for a few yogis and a few select people, or is it for the people, we the people? What is enlightenment? It is rationality. What is that? Literacy. What is that? Dialogue. What is that? I, thou. But if we're living I, it, and we're entrenched mentally, addicted to I, it, to our identity script, then the inevitable pathology is going to continue to haunt us. So the question of the sacredness of our democracy, can we have a real, working, functional, thriving democracy, we the people, in an I-it script and mental function, or do we need to upgrade our literacy in the skills of dialogue, which is reason? Can I listen to the other? Can we dialogue? Can we find common ground? Respect our diversity? That's the key to the thriving of a sacred democracy. So I really appreciate this point being brought out. Keep it going, please.
Hi, my name is Jane. Hi, Ashok. Hi, Kurt.
Jane.
I just first of all want to thank you for being here and facilitating this dialogue. And I came in late, but just in the time that I've been here, I bounced off of so many points that you have brought forth, such as the individual, the collective, the corporation, and especially what you were saying, Kurt, about skills. Awareness can go so far, knowledge can even go so far, but then there's skills. So I'm thinking about an article I read by Matthew Dowd, and I don't normally read these kind of op-eds very much, but he was talking about what do we do now after this last election. And what he was recommending is that no matter where we're coming from, no matter what sides of the fence we live on, we have to be in conversation with each other. We have to be in relationship. And I can only do so much, but if I'm treating the other person with judgment, that's not going to go very far. And could you hold this for a second? I think of something that I'm a teacher and psychotherapist, and I think of something I teach couples. And it's a sort of horizontal line where there's I and there's you. And I'm acting this way towards you, and you're acting that way towards me. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is determine who's right and who's wrong. And so you get stuck there, and it stays very egocentric and very dualistic and very oppositional. And so I draw them a little triangle, and I say, if you start to live from a more enlightened individual place and relational place, you're going to be starting to move toward principles, living and let principles guide it. And you can say it's scripts, a more evolved script that guides it. So how do you relate to each other based on trying to support, be the underpinning for really bringing these principles and scripts into our everyday existence in a skillful way? And so that's so crucial, is what are the skills that we need to bring to this as an I, thou. Like, for instance, on Monday, I'm meeting with a friend who felt very vilified by the people who are asking for higher taxes from the rich. And he's a poet and a very gentle soul, and I've known him and his wife for a long time, and I was so surprised by his rage and anger around feeling so vilified. And I tried to have a discussion with him, but I knew that he was in his rage and anger, and there was no point that I was going to be able to make. And I'm not very good at political discussions anyways. So what I was able to do is just listen and try to hear him from a different place. Ultimately, what he did the next week when I saw him at this gathering was come up and apologize to me. He said, I need to make an amend to you. I really lost myself there, and you were trying to introduce me to somebody or whatever. And I said, that's okay. And then I asked him later if I don't have a lot of financial enlightenment in my life, and he's very financially skillful. So I asked him if he would have coffee with me and help me really think through in a bigger way what I need to do at this time in my life in terms of that more, what can you say it, Republican way of life, no offense, but that more corporate way of life, whatever that may be, to not live from fear, but to ensure some relative safety and goodness in my future life, okay? Otherwise, I do live from fear, and then I judge others who don't have who have more, right? So I'm going to meet with him on Monday, and I'm going to be bringing to him a whole slew of my own shame around that. But what he's asked me to do is think of 3 questions that I can present to him, and he can help guide me to the right resources that I'm going to need to deal with that. And that's part of my first work, is to really work with my own shame, to build that bridge of what are those 3 questions that we can help each other with while I'm listening to him in a different way, not from my own shame, but from my own appreciation of what he gives to me. And I know that in thinking of a higher principled way of relating to this man who stands in a very different place than I do, something really beautiful can happen in that exchange on Monday morning. And that's what I'm looking forward to, because half the time I can't figure out what the hell we're supposed to be doing anyways collectively. It's like, but I can really think about how am I going to treat the next person that I interact with or dialogue with, and how can I do that from a principled place skillfully. So thanks.
Thank you. I'm mindful of the time, and I want to hear voices, so keep going, please.
Hello, my name is Sky. Thank you so much for this discussion. I'm so activated I could nearly jump out of my body, and it might come out as me short-circuiting. So I just wanted to return for a moment to the idea of the collective as being, and collectivity as a potential political disaster. I think that what Ashok was saying earlier on was very, very much a crucial point. That I don't think anyone in the shift movement or these movements that have been springing up towards a global awakening, I don't think that, and from listening to Barbara speak as well, that anyone is pointing to any kind of a proposed solution, a unification of governance, any specific concrete practical plans or political agendas here. I think that, just to iterate, that there's more of, it's more about the spirit that we're stepping into, the kind of a sphere that we're willing to bring to one another in our interactions. For example, I am so excited about the internet because of how I think it's the kind of dialogues that it is promoting. You see things on Facebook, for example, where just absolutely inane, mindless junk, but you also see a lot of compassion, a lot of mutual inspiration, reinforcement. You see movements like Choice Point is a new social network that's popped up where people are trading innovative ideas and enlisting the help of other people, gathering resources. And I think it's really exciting that we're entering into a new paradigm now, in fact, where we're no longer necessarily, or perhaps we're heading in that direction, where we don't need to be relying exclusively on top-down structures, on hierarchies, on politics in order to see significant change happening. It's happening person to person. It's happening as we're connecting with our own creativity, our own impulses, and our own visions of a better world. And that may sound very high-minded and idealistic, but when you think of it from the perspective that, hey, no one has the answers right now. None of us has a grand plan for how we can cross that gap, how we can really shift into a new paradigm. When you see that we're all figuring that out, and that it takes the part of every single person, that is critically important, and the import of connecting synergistically with one another makes that much more optimistic, I think. So
I'm going to make a real quick anecdote. Adam Bucko, who's writing a book now with Matthew Fox called Occupy Spirituality, is from Poland, and he was there when the shift happened in Poland. And he said it happened exactly the way that you mentioned, that because of what people did, the conventional structure became obsolete. And 70% of the people living in Poland were no longer even using the conventional system. They had set up their own interpersonal systems, and it literally just transitioned from one phase to another. So,
thank you. And I had one final comment right there. I just wanted to recount something I heard Barbara Marx Hubbard say on one of her lectures when someone expressed a similar concern that she said, well, how does, when we're thinking about these worldviews having potentially damaging effects, how does that make you act? How does that perception of the collective make you act? Does that make you does that make you exclusive? Does that make you competitive? Does that make you get lost in the collective here? Or does that promote maturity, peaceability, sustainability, solicitousness, empathy? I thought that was a very interesting perception.
Thank you.
My name is Robert. I'd love to see this take place in a large circle, by the way, in the spirit of dialogue sometime. But it's kind of intimidating waiting in line here and building up to this microphone. I hope I can remember what brought me here. Ashok, I would offer a slightly different perspective on your bracket scheme. I see the double brackets above and the single brackets below, but I believe also there are double brackets below within us. And I think the model of moving inward is what several people have talked about. And in my way of looking at what you've said, and I say it's there in your diagram, but I see also this double bracket inside us, not just above us. And what motivates me to say that is that I see an evolution in our egoic state. A lot of people assume that the ego is static, it doesn't evolve, it's always the same. But I listened a lot to Eckhart Tolle, and he's talking about we're moving into totally different kind of understanding of the ego, or beyond the ego, if you will. But there's a capital E ego and a small e ego. And I think it's above us, but it's also inside us. So when we have the corporation outside us, and we might fear that model, I would say that the evolution is happening within the corporation as well as it's happening within us. And there are people who are working in those places that are going to change those systems as well. So I'm very hopeful that the evolution is happening in all directions.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just try and correct this diagram. It's a huge mistake. I forgot to put this up, which I usually do, when I have more time to develop it. This is huge. This is what I was saying, that we're never outside of the infinite space. Presence is here now. What that means is that the self, whatever story you have, it's not this. It's not that your story has the double brackets within it, because you can't encase the infinite within these walls. It's the more accurate way of understanding and rendering each of our names, whatever, here's me, this is my story, and there is that of the infinite within me. The journey of enlightenment or awakening or literacy is to step back from absolutizing whatever story we have and discovering that you were already there. So it's your point, that's beautifully. The infinite self, your higher self, this is a wisdom across the planet, is already here. Enlightenment is not going over there. It's not from here to above. It's showing up where you are. So what you're saying is that every X that there is, every corporation can grow. America can awaken. Whatever it is, it can open up because why? Because it's already under the influence. Just like a DUI. We're LUI. We're living under the influence of the infinite force.
Just real quick anecdote to what the last person said. I was at a meeting in D.C. a couple weeks ago. A woman that was there from the World Bank said exactly what you said, that there are people in the structure of the World Bank who get this. They know what's the way things are done now will not work. It's not sustainable. And so these other things are going on. A newspaper that I've always kept is Boris Yeltsin standing on that tank when the KGB was trying to reverse the Gorbachev shift, and that he had the guts to stand on that tank and realize that the will of the people would actually keep the army back. And he was not pathology free. He's an alcoholic. So change is never pathology free, but it marches on in these amazing ways, like all of you.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm glad to be here and great to see all of you. My name is Stephen Wise. I'll be performing for you all in a little while, and also known as Catriel, my spiritual name and artist name. So, there's a reason why we are all here. There's a deep, deep urge within all of us to do something about these things that we're discussing here today. And, a lot of it has to do with understanding, identifying that program that's being perpetrated by those families that you spoke about, and identifying it and knowing what it is, accurately. And then it's about us coming out of our comfort zones. We are numb to sleep. We are all lulled to sleep by this program, and we have to break that program within ourselves. We can't go and march against an army. You'll never win. You have to. It's a spiritual battle from within, like you said. And I'm just going to amplify a couple things in my way from the heart, okay? And that is that we have to understand about our technology that we came here with. This earth suit that we come through the birth canal, and we are equipped with this earth suit, and we have to know how to apply technologies, okay, the ancient technologies that you spoke about, and the ancient wisdom to accelerate and to activate this infinite potential within us. It says that we're only using 5 to 10% of our capacity of our brain. So then where's that other 90%? And more importantly, how do we get to it? How do we access it, right? So, obviously the ancients have left signs and have left directions and messages for us how to activate these technologies. And, you know, part of it is understanding, like you said, every spiritual path has roadmaps to it. So it's about going past our comfort zones and getting off our butts, okay? And I know that it's difficult because they've got us in such a tight squeeze till we're off balance. Everybody's off balance. We can't pay our bills. You know, we can't, you know, from every different direction, they've got us pinned down. So we can't get to our power. And they know that if we get to our power, that they will not exist anymore. So we have to identify that and recognize that and understand that we have a tree of life within us from the Jewish tradition, or it actually goes beyond. Tree of life, we have, you know, in the Vedic, wherever you go, it's all there. All we have to do is look. We have to go inside, okay? We have to slow down, find time to slow down, and sit in that infinite well that we are. And what happens is you come out of the mind, because the mind is slowing us down. The mind is slowing us down. We have to go to the heart. And that's what 2012, this winter solstice that we are all here for, that we are gathering to this something. Everybody feels that there's something happening and coming, and nobody knows how to identify it. Nobody knows how to make it simple. So this thing that's happening is we're moving into a galactic alignment. What does that mean? It doesn't mean the end of the world. It means the end of a paradigm, that's for sure. But like the Mayan elder said that was going around in the emails, he said it's like an 8-minute window on the solstice. That if we are aligned together, we can capture that and help us to activate that which is within us from the galaxy, from the core of the galaxy. But if we don't, it's just like a passing thought that just passed right through. I felt something, and it's gone. But there have to be gatherings where we are aligned to this energy that's within us and without us. You know?
Thank you very much. Thank you. We look forward to your music.
Hello, my name is Lynn Felix, and I am so happy to be here for the first of the multitude of Birth 2012 events. Today is the first, and I'm excited. And to see you again, Kurt. You were one of my teachers at One Spirit. Oh, yes, it is. So, adding on, in the last few years, I've had the privilege and joy of participating in Barbara's classes and going through class after class, and also simultaneously from the scientific arena. I've been studying with a researcher and an author, an amazing man named Dr. Dan Siegel. And so I've been blending, mindfulness with Jefferson Hospital Integrative Medicine. So I am a person who has learned and understood the I and the we, or the I and the thou, as integration. So alignment and integration of the differentiated parts. There is so much good working in the world, and it is for us to identify and link and integrate all this good stuff that's working in the world. And as John Kabat-Zinn says, mindfulness-wise, there's much more right with us than wrong with us. And so practicing from the individual practice, realizing that every exchange, everywhere, is an exchange of energy and information. That as we speak, from where our consciousness is, where our presence is, whether we're coming from that heart space, that as we speak and as we share our words, the energy of the words as well as the information is exchanged, and it can, through that resonance that we create in being here and now and realizing the immense pleasure and joy of being able to meet each other and be heard and be seen and feel understood. That starts from the time we conceive our children, and then as that child is born through, I've been studying interpersonal neurobiology, how the exchange from caretakers, parents, makes that child activate. All of the mind and the brain is so powerful. We're talking about, getting activated, and it can get activated at any age, which I've also learned from Dr. Siegel. So that from the very beginning of holding that baby, we have an opportunity to help that child to learn presence, to learn safety, security. And that child then becomes that pebble in the pond, showing up in the world as we all do. And through practicing that and bringing that into every exchange, every single exchange, wherever we are, even driving along in the cars and realizing our connection to the other drivers and that we all be safe, etc. So that we have so much ability to practice day by day, monitoring and modifying where we are, and bringing forth that attitude and intention to be present. And as we do this, wherever we work, whatever family or community we're in, we bring that into where two or more are gathered, and therefore the energy and the exchange and the sense of okayness and love comes through. And so, in my sense, from what I've been studying and practicing, it's all here right now, and it's just, we're here to practice this. Having been on global calls, so many in the last few years, and realizing in these breakout sessions in Barbara's classes, how much I could inspire and be inspired by these people all over the world in that moment, that we were in the oneness of the present moment, and there was no other time but now, letting go of the strings of the past and the future to arrive here with beginner's mind and open heart. I wanted to share that.
Thank you so much. I'm mindful of the time and just respecting the program as a whole and the art and music that's coming. We'll have to kind of conclude the open dialogue soon. So if you could, I'd love to hear your voices and keep it as brief as possible. And then we'll kind of move into the kind of closing section. What we're going to do is share with you a beautiful 4-minute moving video film that's gone viral around the planet, a declaration of interdependence, showing faces of the human family around the planet. Then we're going to play a song from my son, Saith, Children of the Sun, Children of the Logos, which is about 3-4 minutes. And then I'm going to read my draft of the Declaration of Interdependence. It speaks to these points quite directly and invite those of you who wish to sign in the ceremony. So that should give you a sense of what we hope to do in a very few minutes. Thank you. Go ahead. Keep going, please. Make it brief as possible.
Yeah, hello. I just want to say thank you for opening for dilating the space here. And the only piece that I was going to point to is we say we hold these truths to be self-evident, which ultimately we together here are holding those truths. And when you dilate that space for us to and enlighten our recognition of that, responsibility comes to my mind as the critical component that we're all linked together in so fundamentally. And that note to be developing our skills as we is the fundamental triumph that we make the shift into we. Then we are the responsible ones for holding the truth that that's actually who we are. And that I just to point that.
That's beautiful, and that's really, you got it, because this event of our being together is not just like as outside spectators, but we are the primary holders and co-founders of our democracy. And that primary sense of responsibility is exactly right. Thank you.
Hey, I just want to say, as of 3 days ago, I feel like I have actually found Christ consciousness, and I feel a constant natural high like happiness that I've never felt before, and I believe I found the way to do this, and it's to scientifically and mathematically prove that God exists, and you can do this through vortex-based mathematics, or Fibonacci spiral, or sacred geometry, which is 3D form of the Merkaba. And that's why the Freemasons have the compass as their sign. And if you can do that, you can manifest anything you want, any tool you want. And I've been doing this, and just amazing things have been happening to me. And if you've heard of the law of attraction by The Secret, this is why no one is actually getting rich off of that book or movie, because you have to understand, not just meditate, but understand what consciousness really is. And it's everything around us is alive.
Thank you very much. And I'd love to talk with you afterwards. I'm just now in my class at the college teaching Descartes' meditations, and where he proves the existence of the infinite being. And what you just talked about, proving God, I mean, the proof in the double brackets, all of our great geniuses knew that how do you realize that there really is an infinite force? You can't, even if you're an atheist, especially if you're an atheist, right? That your capacity to even have a thought is evidence of the presence of presence. The infinite is always here. And that is the proof, it's a living proof. But I'd love to follow up. Keep going, please.
My name is Heidi Scheer, and I agree. My name is Heidi Scheer. I agree deeply with that everything is consciousness. And I think we do create our world by our thoughts. This goes beyond what psychology tells us, that our thoughts create our feelings and our actions, so we will perceive the world differently, act differently. This is true, but I think it goes beyond that. Whatever we think, each morning setting an intention maybe for peace and encountering peace and bringing peace will already set up an atmosphere around us, and even going throughout the world, throughout the universe. And so we can create peace. And I remember, I am German originally. I have been living in the United States for a while now. But I remember when the wall came down in Berlin in November 1989, it was an incredible event. We could hardly believe it while it was happening, that this was possible. And I do strongly believe that this has been already created and prepared by what people thought. It was right after the things in Russia became softer, and this was happening, and this was like a ripple effect. And I'm sure we can do this here, and this is also something that can be a ripple effect and will be a ripple effect, I'm sure.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. Bitte.
Hi, thanks for the discussion. I just want to provide a quick note that I think will be a segue to the next part of the program. You mentioned before the allegory of the cave. One of the most difficult parts of that story was that everyone was very comfortable in the cave, and it was excruciatingly difficult for everyone to realize they were in a cave, that they wanted to get out, and many people actually liked where they were. And since this is going to be a global movement that's going to be going across cultures and dialogues and languages and just about everything there is, what's very important to keep the movement on track will be a very central message that's very grounded, that I think is actually very here, and it's within this paper that you've read. And so I highlighted a couple of points that I think really hit the nail on the head, that we can all keep coming back to and avoid getting lost, and make this something that everyone, regardless of their education level, can really identify with. And it's the following. So we the people recognize that we are humans
and we have always been, intricately interwoven, and hereby resolve to do all in our power and with highest urgency, because it certainly is urgent now, to collaborate across all borders and to bring forth a more evolved, shared form of life in this planetary human family, so we can flourish together, individually and collectively, with the sacred earth. We're all humans. That's the bond that we share. We're all on this planet. We have problems that we need to solve. Everything else is just details. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was a very excellent note, in fact, because in a moment I'll have a reading of that declaration. Thank you for bringing it out. So now let's just breathe, please. This is great. And again, it's clear after our gatherings that there's a hunger for dialogues in a circle. Usually we meet over in Guest Center in a room where we can, face each other. And this dialogue is going to continue. This is just an inaugural rite of passage, building on so many earlier dialogues, so this will continue. And now I'd like to ask that we play the video this is by Tiffany. It's a declaration of interdependence that's going around the planet, that's being signed by many, and it's a great prelude to our version as well. So I'm asking Roger to please play that for us now. It was customized for our occasion here today.
When in the course of human events,
在人类活动的过程中
In the course of human events,
عندما نكون في مضمار الأحداث البشرية,
quand dans le cours des événements humains,
becomes increasingly necessary
para reconocer
to recognize the fundamental qualities
yang menghubungkan kita, that connect us, that connect us.
the truths we hold.
To be self-evident.
Alors nous devons réévaluer les vérités que nous tenons pour acquises.
That all humans are
created equal.
and all are connected.
比如每个人都是生来平等，并且联系在一起的。
That we share the pursuits of life,
La recherche d'une vie meilleure.
Liberty, الخيروط,
Happiness,
kebahagiaan,
food,
والغذاء, water, agua,
shelter,
el refugio, seguridad,
education,
pendidikan, justice.
and hopes for a better future.
That our collective knowledge,
economy, technology, and environment
are fundamentally interdependent.
Interdependent.
ketergantungan kita.
that what will propel us forward
لأن لدينا شجاعة على التقدير.
is our curiosity.
Curiosity.
Rasa ingin tahu kita.
Our ability to forgive, kemampuan kita untuk memaafkan.
Our ability to appreciate.
Our courage.
Our courage.
Keberanian kita.
and our desire to connect.
D'être connecté.
That these things we share. في نهاية المطاف إلا تطور.
To our fullest common potential.
Le cose che noi teniamo insieme sono le cose del nostro mondo.
我们应该严肃对待我们的问题。
We should never take ourselves too seriously.
Kwa sababu jambo jingine linalotuunganisha
huwa qudratuna ala الضحك.
Dan upaya kita untuk belajar dari kesalahan kita.
So that we can learn from the past.
Understand our place in the world.
Memahami tempat kita di dunia.
Use our collective knowledge.
To create a better future.
去创造一个更美好的未来。
So perhaps it's time
Jadi mungkin sudah saatnya kita
That we, as a species,
sebagai spesies, as a species,
You love to laugh.
que disfruta de reír.
love to laugh,
Poser questions.
ask questions, and connect.
Do something radical and true. For centuries,
We have declared
independence.
Perhaps it's now time
That we, as humans, declare our interdependence.
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 Many around the planet find that very moving, and people are signing in, and it sets a beautiful space for us to share our draft of a Declaration of Interdependence. Now I'm going to share a song from my son, Saeed. He's a musician. He grew up on campus here, training classical music, and he left college, even though he was on the dean's list, because he said, "Dad, it's stifling me." He went out west in Sedona and became a yoga teacher, and highly spiritual artist, and he has several discs out. And the song we're sharing is called Children of the Sun. And the person who just referred to the allegory of the cave in Plato, if you've read Plato's Republic, which is quite relevant to what we're talking about here, Plato said in the Republic and suggested in effect that until wisdom presides in our culture, there will not be justice. And the allegory.
It's been a long time.
This is a song.
We've been wandering in the rain and wondering when we're gonna see the sun again. Now it is our time. This world will never be the same. Remember who you are, my friend, is why we came. I know you feel it.
I know you feel it.
And you know it's who you are. Time to reveal it.
Time to reveal it.
This is why we've come this far. And we can heal it.
And we can heal it.
In the world that's birthing through. Can you believe it?
Can you believe it?
This is what we're here to do. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
There's no time to wait anymore.
No time to wait.
You know we are the ones that we've been waiting for. And it is our time.
And it is our time.
In this time we're gonna heal.
And we can heal it.
By standing in the love is how we make it real. I know you feel it.
I know you feel it.
And you know it's who you are. Time to reveal it.
Time to reveal it.
And this is why we've come this far. Time to receive it.
Time to receive it.
There's a world that's birthing through. Can you believe it?
I can believe it.
This is what we're here to do. the children of the sun. We are the children of the sun. We are the children.